All right, well, Mickey's big hand is on the 2, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hey, I'm Chris McEniry. I wanna welcome you to the last sessions of the day, last block. Hope it's been a good conference for everyone. We're here to talk about Cassandra and introducing it into a heavily traditional database-oriented organization and some of the soft stuff that we had to work through to get it going, because I figure there's plenty of other sessions about the hard stuff or the technical stuff. So a little bit background on us. I'm the ops guy. You can tell by the black. He's not wearing black. He's not the ops guy. Though that being said, I have a strong CS history, so I do like to dabble. I do like to play around. I've been working with Cassandra since 0.6, and I'm going to let my dev guy introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Igor. I've been a software architect for most of my life, professional life. Done this mostly in the e-commerce space, speak a little Java, speak a little Ruby, and I've done Cassandra since 1.0, mostly introduced by Mac and by stumbling upon a book. Question here for all of you, who actually has Cassandra in production? All right, about half the room. Who thinks Cassandra is a really cool technology and would love to use it in production? Come on, that should be the entire room, right? So we hope that what we do here and what we talk about is going to be good for the second half. So the people who have it in production and the people who don't really have it in production yet. So what we're talking about is really what did it take for us to get Cassandra established as a technology alternative in an organization that really speaks relational databases very, very well, and that also speaks one particular brand of relational databases very, very well. Right? So Mac's going to talk about how we got started. Oh no, actually before that.
This is still you.
Still me. What's our organization? What do we look like, right? We have hundreds of millions of customers. SNEI may be better known as the PlayStation Network, right? So on Christmas morning, we have more people playing on the network than live in the country of Norway, and they all want to do this at the same time, right? We have billions of transactions every year, shifting pennies from left to right. It's all microtransactions. And we have these peaks. What does it feel like, though? Sony itself is a very large organization, huge company, and within that, we're somewhat of a startup. We really have to comply with everything that makes the company great, any 3-letter audit known to man, right? And at the same time, we also have tremendous pressure to innovate and tremendous pressure to make money, because you're not going to be innovating for a very long time if you don't make money, right? But now it's Mac's turn to go and talk about how we get started on Cassandra.
So, as I said, I'm the ops guy. Though, that being said, I do like to dabble. I like to explore. I like to see what's out there. I've been using Cassandra since before the developer guy had been using Cassandra. So, from my standpoint, part of that's me, part of that's my job, to go out, try to see what new technologies there are, try to see what we can use in the organization. So it's all about exploring and bringing that in. So that's what motivates me. As I'm looking for these things, I got to try to decide what motivates everyone else. Is everyone motivated in the same way? Do they want that personal growth? Do they want the curiosity? Or are we really just trying to lessen the pain? Because I think anyone here can attest to how painful other technologies can be and what we're trying to do to avoid that. So, what is that pain again? I don't want to be woken up at 4 a.m. I don't want this to explode. And as the ops guy, the other thing that always seems to happen is I'm left cleaning something up. I try to avoid that. But at the same time, if that's my motivation, then we're not going to get anywhere. I need to say, how do we find something, how do we bring it in? How do we make that happen? I can't keep saying no just because there's going to be some pain, because that makes me the bottleneck, and just like the bottleneck in any of our technologies, that's not acceptable. We have to optimize and work around it if need be. So from the bottleneck standpoint, I think about what some people have been talking about with regards to developer happiness. What platforms can I build that makes the developers be able to build what they need on, on top of that and extend it and work it out? So again, from that standpoint, what does a developer look for? Well, there's always that new shiny, seem to have stuff, keys dangling in front of faces, seems to happen a lot. But really, there's feature comparisons. There's, does this actually work? Is it mature enough? And does it actually solve problems that the developers are looking for? Those are all the things I try to embody when I'm evaluating stuff. But again, I can't do this by myself. So as I said, I'm just building a platform. It really depends on my developers to help me out and figure out what they need. Otherwise, I come up with a bunch of solutions that are looking for problems. And while that's kind of cool, that doesn't necessarily work. So I had to start with a problem. I have a solution, now we need to go where the problem is.
Yeah, so that's really, if you're interested in introducing Cassandra into your organization, the one key thing is finding the right problem. You really are looking for a problem that's solved by Cassandra very well, right? Don't take any problem. If you have one where you could simply say, you know what, slap an Akamai cache in front of a whole bunch of static data, go do that, right? Don't waste your time building more complex systems if you have different ways of addressing them. You really need to figure something where the problem that you're trying to solve aligns with the technology and is not solved well by anything else that you could put up. While you're deploying this, while you're developing this, everybody has their own favorite technology, their own favorite way of solving problems, and they will all have an idea about how to solve your particular problem. And if any of the ways that they can come up with in solving your problem is better, then you ought to go down that route. So picking the right problem, thinking really hard about it, that's the biggest way in which you can advance Cassandra inside your organization. So our problem turned out to be a speed of light problem, and we couldn't really resist the pun here and said, oh yeah, we're going to throw a little c star at the c squared, and then our problem goes away, right? So do that in a little bit less cryptic terms. What we're trying to do is we're trying to solve a problem where we're providing the same customer experience across the globe to everybody on the planet. Where we're trying to provide authentication that is rapid, and we're also trying to provide authentication that is always on. If people can't play their games just because we're not able to check their username and their password, then people get angry, rightfully so. We learned that the hard way, as you guys may remember. So why is that a speed of light problem, right? Speed of light problem in the sense that if you look at the world from one particular place, and let's assume we're looking at the world from San Francisco because we're here, then the customer experience that results is directly correlated to the distance that this person on the planet is from San Francisco, right? Your latency, your access time, your response time that they perceive is directly correlated to the speed of light to the distance that results. So how do you go solve this problem? Quite simply, you put a lot of data centers in a lot of places, right? And that gives everybody the same distance, that gives everybody the same chance of having a very short connection to your closest point of presence. Now the question is, why does Cassandra fit this problem very well, right? First of all, it's not a cache problem. It's not about putting things that can be stale somewhere. Username, passwords, they need to be up to date. They're very dynamic data. If you put them into all these different places, then what you really want to do is you want to make sure that all the data is everywhere. You can't really just chart this and say, oh, this country gets their data center and this country gets their data center. What you really want to do is make sure that if you need to fail over from one data center to another, all your data is the same. At the same time, if you're playing DNS games to route people, that's great, but it's never perfect. So really looking at having all the data available in all the places, Cassandra synchronizes that for you very well. Same time, if you have all these points of presence, what you're doing is you're asking for lines to be cut, right? The internet is not stable by any means, so anytime you will have all these connections, one of them will be severed practically on a daily basis. There, Cassandra helps you again. It picks up after separation. It survives partitioning really well. So that's a problem that's very well suited to be solved with Cassandra. That was the ideal situation for us. So how do we move from, we have the sexy technology, we have the right problem, now how do we give birth to this whole idea? How do we get it into production? You gotta go and find allies, right? If Mac and I hadn't found each other, and if we hadn't worked together on this particular problem, it would have never ever made it into production. So what you're looking for is you're looking for somebody who sees the same problem, for somebody who recognizes that this problem is important to your organization. If you're trying to solve some peripheral issue that you can't get any dynamics behind it, not going to happen, right? So pick the right problem, pick the right allies. What you want to stay away from, though, is people who are excited about this technology, who see the world the same way, but who do have an inherent conflict of interest. And that, for whatever reason, they may be the greatest people to work with, they may be your best friends. If their day job provides them or puts them in a position where they end up being Jekyll and Hyde, that's not going to help them, it's not going to help you. Doesn't mean that you exclude them, but it means you're not relying on them as an ally. Right? At the same time, go and develop your mantra. Develop your elevator pitch about what the problem is that you're trying to solve. You can have countless conversations with people that say, oh, what is the problem? What are you trying to solve? Why don't you really have just a solution? Aren't you really just trying to pick or push this particular technology? You need to be prepared for those conversations, and you need to be prepared to give an answer in under 30 seconds, right? It really helps articulate the things that you're trying to address. It really helps getting people behind it. Boil it down to something very, very simple. Ours ended up being latency, 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 right? Something that you can really coin the term that you can rally people behind, right? And right now it's time to get a little uncomfortable, I think.
Yep. So you have a new technology, you're playing around it, you found the right problem, you've gotten some allies, you start rolling it out, you're going to be outside of your comfort zone. No matter what you want to do, it's going to be the new experience, it's going to be knowing what the new operational items are, it's going to be, hey, it's this new and shiny, what does that actually mean? So keep in mind, that's okay. You know, in any kind of situation, it's only going to work if you take some experiments. Some experiments are inherently going to make you uncomfortable. So the other thing to keep in mind, going back to the allies and the anti-allies, you know, the proof's on you. When it comes down to it, you need to be the one who, or they're going to come to you and say, hey, this is working great, or this isn't working, what's going on, how do we fix it? You're the one who's going to have to answer for that. And that is uncomfortable as well. But again, you're experimenting, that should be okay. The key through all of that is to stay positive. And one of the ways you stay positive is by avoiding the naysayers. There we go. So there's a new kind of racy chart out there. Well, okay, it's a cute slide, but it kind of comes down to, you know, I can't stress enough that you, in your initial implementations, you have to pick the right people, you have to target the right simple things. This isn't about excluding anyone, this isn't about rejecting it, it is about, number one, making your team manageable, and number two, it's about giving it a reasonable area to grow within. So the quick analogy is, if you're trying to put an oak tree in the desert, whether that's a good idea or not, you're not, if you just put it there, it's going to die. But if you start to build a greenhouse and you build irrigation around it, it has a chance to live. And this is what this is about, making sure that what your investment is, you're protecting on. So if you live in a desert, this is what you need to remember. Yep. The other thing at this time in the life cycle, what you need to start thinking about is your models. And you can go through and be like, yes, Cassandra has the nodes, it has its data centers, it has its topology. That's one set of models. That's your architectural model. The other things, which are the ones that are in a lot of ways going to be the proof, is what is your deployment model? Is this going to be attached to multiple applications? Is it going to be singly attached to a single application? Does that bring in security concerns? Does that bring in, data integrity, data commingling concerns, anything like that? So you have to decide how your interaction with your applications are going to be. You need to also decide, especially as you're offering this out, what's your support model? It's one thing to say, hey, here's a Cassandra cluster, go use it. And people are like, well, how do I connect to it? Oh, okay, well, you do this. Or go talk to these other guys, they're already connected to it. Both these formal and informal, community-based or on your own support models are valid. You just have to decide which one works for your organization. And so as I put this together from the ops side, from a platform building side, I look at it from a service offering model, which really is the audience for this is a developer who needs to use the service or wants to use the service. It's going to give them a quick description what it is, how mature we feel it is as both the technology itself and our ability to execute on the technology, version topologies, sizing, how to connect, how to request help. All these things are the stuff you start to fill out, and these are just kind of the high-level items of what you need to do. Doesn't mean you have to resolve all of these at this time. If you're not doing anything important with the data, maybe you don't need a DR plan. That's acceptable. But you at least have to go in there with a conscious effort of this is what we care about and this is what we don't care about. And so once you have the service offering, you can say, hey, developer, here's a service offering, go build something on it.
Right, so how do you get from this minimal service offering to something that you have deployable in production? It's important you don't start with the crown jewels, right? So you picked your problem, the problem's sexy, great, but realistically, as a development organization, you really have a very small understanding of what Cassandra is, what it could be, right? Pick something that is easy for you to get to solve, that's small enough so that you're not stumbling, right? You need to look for the win. You need to look for something that will work. So you take a minimal viable product approach to this whole thing, right? So at this point, you're looking to start hopefully with transient data, right? We picked authentication tokens. They live for about 20 minutes. Great, so even if everything goes pear-shaped and we lose them, yes, we're looking at something that's not nice, but it's not going to cost us the company, right? So look for problems, look for applications that have this transient nature while you're getting eased into how do I store data in Cassandra, how do I operate the cluster, how do I really interact with all of this, right? Second, go pick which driver you want. There are plenty of them out there, Hector, SDNX, the new data stacks driver. Look at which one fits your development methodology best. Look at which data models you want to drive from that, and learn about how to model data within Cassandra. Right? The same thing, you want to look at how data gets stored in Cassandra. You need to look at how does serialization happen? How do we actually use comparators, this whole time series concept? And then look at all the terms that you think you know, right? So I looked at the term index and I thought I knew what an index does. Turns out that's only half true when you look from a relational database model over to Cassandra. Indexes, especially secondary ones, aren't really the same thing that you're used to for search. So go look at it and see what you have to unlearn and then what you have to relearn in the new world so that you can actually take advantage of the technology to its maximum capacity.
So we got something small, it's running, it's going in production. Now's the time to start getting really serious about this. You have proof, you have something that shows this works. Take the training wheels off, go buy a bigger bike. Get out the daddy's credit card and pony up for support, or this is where you start engaging DataStax Enterprise, because you can conceive and use the additional use cases that it provides. You start having, it's no longer a completely theoretical question, it's you have some real data to back this up with. You can start introducing other data classes. All of the assumptions you made in the first place, you can be like, hey, yeah, we had transient data, but now I have a backup strategy because I know how to do snapshots and save those off. And more importantly, I know how to restore them. Keep in mind, that's the real part, the real reason for backups. So you can start persisting data or using persistent data. You start introducing your data lifecycle management. This is what it's going to look like. This is where it's going to tier into. This is what is more acceptable data. Start introducing all of the, squirmy data, PII, PCI, any of those kinds of things. This is your chance to start saying, hey, we can now tackle those. At the same time, in doing that, you have to acknowledge your gaps, okay? If you don't have authentication running, the authentication agents running on your Cassandra nodes, you're probably not going to want to be doing PCI data in there, or even PII. If you don't have at-rest encryption going on, maybe you avoid the PCI data. Look at those gaps, decide which ones you need to tackle, and introduce your security team to what's going on and see what they look at and what they're concerned about. The key thing is, this is the awkward teenage years. You got to revisit your assumptions. And revisiting some of your assumptions, you're going to have to revisit who your allies are. This is where you need to go back, get more allies. Okay, as I said, we've engaged security, we've started talking to them, we just engaged some of the traditional database people and start talking to them. Additional application teams, we originally started with one application team, now we have 4 using it, and a 5th one coming online. These things grow and they grow incrementally until they hit some critical mass and take off. The downside of all of this is, as you engage more people, keep in mind you are going to be bringing on more battles, you are going to be bringing on more questions. You got to be ready for them, and again, you got to acknowledge the gaps that are there, because the proof, again, is going to come back to you. You have some proof, you can use that capital, but you're only as good as what you're going to do for me tomorrow, right? So you have to keep that in mind and still be a little selective with what's going on there. But you are more resilient, so you have some chances there. At the same time, you want to solidify, all of the other items on the service offering. Again, backups, have something planned for them. Authentication, deployment models, be building that out, maybe exploring different deployment models, based on data segmentation. We put all the key critical data over here, we put the non-critical ones in other clusters, figure out what your topologies look like from that standpoint. The other thing, you think it works. Whenever you have issues with this, you can always go back and again, expand that capital that you've already gained up, use your mantra, again, with us, it was latency, latency, latency. You have proof. Don't forget that. Don't rub it in people's faces, but don't forget that. And then as you go through this teenage transition, you're obviously into the adult phase, and this is where something is within its full life cycle. And honestly, for us, we're a large company. It took us 1.5 years to get where we are, even at this phase. In this adult phase, I can't even consider we're there. That's our future. So the other thing is you got to be patient with a lot of this. And don't forget that, in large companies, transition takes time. There's more people, there's more moving parts. You can go back to the keynote and listen with regards to, the endowment effects and all of the expended, capital, sunk costs. It's all there. You got to keep that in mind. So along those lines, where are we now? I'm going to steal Igor's equation and say, well, this isn't necessarily a latency issue anymore. What we've seen as a large company, our bigger issue is our mass, our inertia, our momentum, whatever you want to call it. Our ability to change. It takes a lot of energy for us to get a deployment out the door, but that's because we have this mass. That being said, with Cassandra and some of these changes, that mass is decreasing. We're becoming more agile. We're using less energy for these deployments. So there's certainly pieces for that for us to go forward. Anything else? Or?
Yeah, and before we forget, we are hiring. So if you liked what you heard, then stop by later, and I think it's time for questions.
Yep. Or not. That's okay too.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll repeat the questions or give a mic. We got the mic.
Okay, great presentation, guys. So how did you get started? Like you started with 0.6 and 1.0. Did you engage, with data stacks? I don't work for them, or Akunu, or So how did you get started? Did you go out to the market and get help, or is it all self-taught?
Yeah. I mean, the initial pass, honestly, is all self-taught. I mean, one of the things which we didn't go into is the fact that Cassandra is open source. There's no budget approval. You can play with it on your own. You can run a single instance. It actually is fairly easy to start an instance. Maintaining a large cluster, that's different, but starting it is relatively easy. So at the initial points, that's where you can you use that to its degree. It wasn't until later on when we could take out the credit card and actually say, hey, we have huge value from this, expand on that.
Yeah, and from a development perspective, we didn't start with Cassandra and ended there. Cassandra was the winner of a large evaluation. We looked at a whole bunch of other technologies. We looked at in-memory data grids. We looked at a whole bunch of other NoSQL databases, and really looked at the use case for what we're trying to solve and said, which of these technologies solves our use case the best? And Cassandra was the winner, primarily because it simply scales linearly, right? So whatever problem I have, I can absolutely kill the problem by putting more instances up at the same time.
Any other questions?
So after succeeding with a session project with Cassandra, what else have you migrated to Cassandra?
So I know the other customer, the other application team customers are using it. One is the use case is largely an audit log usage. And then I know the additional auth teams, there's doing the authentication tokens on the server side. And then there's the clients of those authentication tokens, which end up being other applications within our service fleet. So they actually have their tokens inside Cassandra as well.
And it's really simple to find the adjacent problem once you have the first one solved successfully. We have lots of people that are looking at this now and say, oh, this is cool. It has all these aspects of how I can store data, how I can look up data, how I can deal with distributing data. And all of a sudden, you find more and more possible applications, right? And that's when you start to build the momentum inside the organization, that's where it's going to be easy to find the next problem that looks similar to what you've already solved from a characteristic standpoint, and then you'll be able to solve that as well.
Yeah. One of the examples of that is right now we have one team using, going back to the new team that's using it is doing it as an audit log. We have an existing events flow where events get processed, get sent all the way back to the warehouse. One possibility is those event logs look exactly like the audit logs. So right now we're already drawing comparisons. So it's really easy if you just look at what's you look at what the velocity of stuff coming in is, what format it is, what its ultimate destination is, and you can start saying, hey, these actually look like very similar problems.
All right, cool. If there's one last question, otherwise I think we're out of time. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.